This is me at 16 years old in Israel on a high school trip holding an assault rifle, and this is the definition of indoctrination. I grew up in North Miami Beach. I grew up in a very insulated, very Jewish community. We were taught that Palestine and Palestinians, that's not a real thing, that was made up by Arabs. Everybody over there that wasn't Jewish was just Arabs. But the message was always clear that Jews were not safe and that the Arabs wanted to hurt us. My relatives, my great-grandmother, my grandmother were raised with this fear mentality that without the state of Israel, Jews around the world will not be safe. True history was kept from us. We were propagandized. But as I grew older, I began to see a different reality unfolding. I witnessed the rise of the Israeli lobby, exerting its influence on our politics and policies. I learned about the injustices happening thousands of miles away in the name of Jewish people. And I can't stay silent in the face of such injustice. The right to return denied to so many Palestinians. The war fueled by the Israeli government and sanctioned by our own country, condemned by the UN and the International Court of Justice as genocide. We cannot turn a blind eye to this injustice any longer. To me, atonement is really taking accountability for your participation in something that you now realize was not correct in some way and wronged people in some way. I participated in an ethnic cleansing state. I do not feel powerless, I feel hopeful. It is time for us to use our voices, to stand in solidarity with the oppressed, to demand accountability from our leaders. As a candidate, as a mother, as an ally, I pledge to fight for justice and equity for everyone, here at home and abroad. For there can be no peace without true justice. I'm Jen Perlman. I'm running for Congress, Florida's 25th district.
Jen, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on.
What a great video. What a great, for one, great production value. Just from a technical perspective, it looks amazing. But the content of this video is, I mean, this is very striking. And this is, I mean, it's shocking, in fact, some of the stuff that you reveal in this video. I want to talk about this a bit more. How old were you, did you say, when you went over there and you were holding the rifle?
16. I was
16
in a
years old.
program. Yeah, I was in a program called Alexander Muss High School in Israel, which still exists. It's still a program because I get like the alumni newsletters. And you do essentially, it's sort of like semesters. You do a semester of high school in Israel. And then if you do it during the year, you actually get to miss the school year, but then you have to get tutored to catch up. But I did it over the summer session. So it was basically the whole summer, and you study what they teach as history, but now I know is fantasy. But you learn about the historic sites, and then you go see them, which actually was amazingly cool.
Right. Yeah. The historical sites.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think this was the same trip that I know that Kamala Harris has now selected Governor Tim Walz to be her running mate, but Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, there was a trip that he apparently took, and he said it was in high school, and he had volunteered. You know, he said that he had volunteered with the IDF and he had done stuff at a kibbutz. Do you think that was the same? And I believe it was in high school when he took that trip. Do you think it was the same sort of trip?
Yeah, I mean, well, they sponsor so many different trips. I mean, that's not the program I did, and the only reason that I had access to holding an assault rifle was because wherever we traveled, we had to have an armed guard with us. And, you know, in retrospect, of course, that's just a major red flag. Like, if you're taking my teenager someplace that they need to be protected with an assault rifle, you're probably taking them somewhere they ought not be. So that's something like I think of now. But we didn't like, I didn't use rifles, I mean, that was never, and I never sort of intimated that I did. That was, but we were just, it was always around us.
Hmm. What was it like growing up? You say that you grew up in North Miami and that you were indoctrinated from the time that you were young. What does that mean exactly, the indoctrination?
Well, when you're really indoctrinated, you don't remember it happening. So what, like, I grew up, and the basic premise was that as Jews, Israel was our place. It was our safe place. If there wasn't an Israel, Jews would not be safe in the world. The goal was for all of the Jews to be in Israel. Like, it was so matter of fact and so part of being Jewish. And that is not for all Jewish people by any stretch, but for Ashkenazi Jews, let's say East Coast in this country, in my generation, it was very conflated with Israel. And so it was everything. It was as simple as when I went to the JCC, which is the Jewish Community Center, which was right near my elementary school. And I would go there for after school. I would go there for camp. And by the way, so did a lot of people. It was, it was right there. But they were always telling stories about Israel, singing songs. We learned the Israeli national anthem at a very young age, and Hatikva, it was just played. Everything, craft, art, everything was about Israel. We would have full classes on Israeli folklore and Israeli folk dance and all these different things, which of course now I realize it's just all Palestinian, and that the Zionists coveted it and stole it and rebranded it. But I don't remember ever first being taught about Israel. Like, there was no, it was just a given.
Hmm. So was that not only in your community center, but also in your home? Like, were your parents saying the same sorts of things?
Not my parents, but my grandparents, my great aunts and uncles, and like the cousins, the extended family. My parents were very hippie, kind of atheist, and had
Hmm.
sort of been, I don't want to say like banished. They weren't banished, but like my dad would have never gone to Passover Seder at his uncle's house because he just wouldn't. But I used to go with my grandmother all the time. So it was really more of
Hmm.
an extended family thing. I have cousins that live in Jerusalem. And when I was there, when I was 16, I actually went and visited with them for a bit, and they still live there. They've been there. My cousin moved there. I want to say it was like early 70s. I was a baby. And
Hmm.
so we've always had that. There's always been a family connection for me in Israel.
I'm just trying to understand, how this has because it is such an aspect of the Jewish identity, right? I mean, that's why when we criticize, when those of us who are not Jewish, or even Jewish people, I mean, you're experiencing it now, right? When you criticize
Yeah.
Israel, you're suddenly anti-Semitic or you're a self-hating Jew, right? Just it's totally and completely, the country is conflated with Jewish identity, with the religion. It is
Yep.
not separated as just a foreign country that happens to be populated with majority Jews. Like many other countries are populated with majority, people from whatever religion. It doesn't, people don't tend to conflate, that religion with that country. I don't think, like, when we
Yeah.
criticize China, I'm not like, oh my gosh, you're going after Buddhists, you hate the Buddhists, or you hate, it's not something that really, or when India is criticized, we're not necessarily saying we hate the Hindus, right? That doesn't come out. I mean, of course, you'll find the people, so, here and there, that will say something like that, but by and large, it's not conflated the same way that it is Judaism with Israel, and just Jewish culture with Israel. I'm just trying to understand how that even happens. I mean, so you're painting a pretty, where, how do you think the community center got to the point where they were, because this throughout Jewish history has not been, I mean, Zionism in the state of Israel is new.
Yes.
Israel's new. I mean, this was founded within
Yeah.
my dad's lifetime.
Yeah.
Uh, so so that I know Zionism existed prior to the birth of Israel, but not much before that, actually. It wasn't, started in maybe mid to late 1800s, right? What
Yeah.
did So somewhere along the line, this became part of the indoctrination. This clearly wasn't said to Jews back in 1800, 1810. What were Jews learning about? They weren't learning about this.
Right. No, in fact, most Jews and in the diaspora prior to the formation of the state of Israel were not in line with that. Like, the Zionist concept was much more, it was pretty radical. And it wasn't something that most of that, and also, by the way, the original Zionists, it was much more like communism, in how they created kibbutzim, and they would,
Mhm.
so it was more of a, just a way of living, and it was very secular. And most Jews were not with that. However, then you fast forward to post Holocaust. And now you have a very, very ripe opportunity of people that have just come from major trauma, who have lost family members. And you're very able to manipulate and gaslight people and create this very fear-based mentality, which they did. I am not kidding when I tell you I grew up with the understanding that if there was no Israel, Jews would not be safe in the world. And so when that, it seems to me easy prey, because I know that my grandmother's generation, my great grandmother's generation, while they weren't directly coming from Europe, because my family came here like in 1901-ish, so it wasn't just post Holocaust, but they had so much family there. So these are people that were having severe PTSD. So now you forward to, okay, so my mom was actually born in 48. And one of the things she always remembers growing up was that in her family, it was because she shared the same birth year as Israel. And that was some whole big thing. So my mom always grew up in, like, on her birthday, they would celebrate her, they'd celebrate Israel. Like, it was just this, it was just part of our existence. And I do think it was bred in to those generations that were very PTSD from the Holocaust. And
Yeah.
that way it was much easier to sort of mainstream this idea of Zionism, because these people were in fear, versus prior to that, where most Jews in the diaspora were fine.
Yeah. I think that's why so many of us have great sympathy for the situation. I mean, the Holocaust obviously was something that was so atrocious and terrible that nobody wants to see that happen ever again. You know, nobody wants to go down that path. Nobody. It was just so terrible and atrocious that I think people uh, almost overcorrect, right? Which is why people are kind of which is why Germany in particular is turning a total blind eye to Israel and what they're doing. I mean, Germany has banned. They've very significantly limited any sort of pro-Palestinian protests in Germany. They don't want to see it. They don't want to hear it. They're like, look,
That's
we
overcorrection. They're
right. They're
overcorrecting is
overcorrecting
basically
big time.
Germany.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I can understand. I mean, just coming out of things that were not nearly as bad, but they were still bad for the trauma that it caused on the people. But things like 9/11 and how that freaked out the entire country, and everybody was willing to give up their freedoms in
Yep.
order to gain safety, right? People were willing to, there's, all right, fine, Patriot Act. All right, fine. We'll, you could go ahead and put us on watch lists. Like, you could do all of these things to us in the name of safety. And people were really freaked out on that. Or even during the pandemic, we saw, when there was a lot of fear there, and so people were willing to behave in ways that they normally would have never behaved. They were closing down their businesses or locking down, or no matter which way you were feeling about the pandemic, it still created that, the fear of it created
Yep.
a reaction and a behavior that was quite extreme, right? And a belief system
Yep.
from that was quite extreme. And so I could see when you take that, and that what we've experienced in our actual lives, I mean, because you and I were not alive for the Holocaust, right? So we could only go with what we've
Sure.
dealt with. But then to kind of think, okay, well, when something was so terrible and so frightening and so atrocious that, imagine the pandemic and the fear that was out there, and then multiply that by 1,000, right? That was like the Holocaust for the Jewish people, I would imagine. And so it would create that anything to be safe mentality, right? And people would go along with that and say absolutely anything to be safe. But did
Yeah,
you
and
ever
keep
learn
in
in these?
okay. No,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I was just gonna
Well, I'm
say it
just
was
curious.
easier to get
Yeah.
away with it. It was easier to get away with it because they didn't have access to the information. So it's easy
Well,
to gaslight people.
yeah, I mean, obviously, I think the majority of Jews weren't trying to, I think the majority were not thinking, oh, we're gaslighting, we're getting away with this, right? I think the majority believed that this
Oh,
was
yeah.
truly the homeland and the best place to be. And then they didn't realize perhaps that there was a group of really extreme terrorists that were over there setting up this country and terrorizing a group of people in order to achieve the goal. Like, I think most
Right.
people, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think that most people didn't connect and think, well, in order for us to achieve this, we have to commit a really atrocious crime on somebody else.
No, we were gaslit. That's what I'm saying. We were lied to. And the people like the forefathers of Zionism, the people like your David Ben-Gurions, your Golda Meirs, the people that did know that they were ethnically cleansing a population, purposefully created propaganda and lies to mislead that entire population of people. And it was easier then because we didn't have access to the information. It wasn't like
Right.
you could Google it and find out that they were lying. So, no, this was very calculated, very planned. They knew that Jews would reject this concept based on the idea of having to ethnically cleanse indigenous people. And so they lied about it.
Well, we've all heard the latest about COVID with Biden catching it, and now the chatter about bird flu and even a bird flu vaccine, despite it not really affecting people. It's hard to keep up. And honestly, it feels like we're always being told to fear something new. But you know what? We don't have to be caught off guard. Introducing the wellness company's Contagion Emergency Kit. Now, this isn't just any kit. This is a prescription only stockpile of critical life saving medications. We're talking about Tamiflu, Z-Pak, budesonide, a nebulizer, plus those medications that were unrightfully demonized during the pandemic. Those are included too. These are medications that every American should have in their medicine cabinet. Now, let's face it, most doctors out there still will refuse to prescribe certain medications that were demonized to help combat illnesses like COVID, but you don't have to worry about that. The wellness company has you covered. Their one-of-a-kind prescription contagion emergency kit is available online, and it's incredibly easy to order. Imagine the peace of mind knowing you have these emergency meds on hand, along with a guidebook for safe use. And let me tell you, this kit is backed by solid research from experts like Dr. Peter McCullough. So why wait? Go to twc.health/Kim and get your contagion emergency kit right now. Use the code Kim to save over $45 at checkout and get free shipping. Remember, these kits are only available in the USA. That's twc.health/Kim. Stay prepared, stay informed, and most importantly, stay safe. Hey guys, this was just a clip of a longer show. Catch the full show by going to KimIversonShow.com. It is free. It airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. You could go back now and watch this full interview. I highly recommend it. Again, go to KimIversonShow.com. Thank you so much for watching.